All right. Good afternoon, IHSA football family. It is Peter Leinweber, a.k.a. Coach Big Pete of DeepDishFootball.com. And this is a special video. I talked to coaches about recruiting and their process and everything else. And there's a lot of the same question, but it needs to be taken care of because there's a lot of parents that don't understand what high school coaches do. And I know a lot of high school coaches right now that bust their butt and they do everything for the kid. And like I said, we are living in the state of Illinois in the golden age of high school coaches because they do everything and anything for these kids. And they're just awesome coaches, honestly. They're really great coaches. So this is a video, and I want to thank all the coaches that participated in this video, that took their time because they're busy schedules. These are family men. And they work at the schools, and that they do an unbelievable job. And they've dedicated their time and their work to the betterment of the kids and our younger generations, and they do a wonderful job. So shout out to Coach Dodson of Chicago Academy, Coach Chrissy, Glenbard South, Coach Pyron of Batavia High School, Coach Vonzak of St. Charles North, Coach LeBlanc of Oswego East, and I'm forgetting one coach, and it is a mental block. Hopefully, I named all of Coach Plants of Lake Zurich High School. I almost forgot him, but great guy is and just a wonderful coach. And he actually coached college football, was the head coach at Elmhurst College, and is now the head coach at Lake Zurich. These are all head coaches, but all of them are just awesome guys. Great role models of what a head coach should be. And I'm going to be doing more interviews with head coaches. And I'm going to do another compilation video with a bunch of coaches talking about what they do in the recruiting process as well, because I want parents to understand you do not need to pay for recruiting services. These coaches work their butts off for these kids, these football players, and please enjoy. And make sure you follow Coach Big Pete and Deep Dish Football on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. My email is coachbigpetefp@gmail.com. coachbigpetefp@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much, and enjoy all these interviews, and have a fun time. And again, if you have any questions, email me, coachbigpetefp@gmail.com. All right, welcome. And this is, I'm talking to right now, Lake Zurich head coach, Coach Branson. I know him before that. He was the head coach of Elmhurst College, CCIW team in Elmhurst, Illinois, and just a wonderful guy. Coach Plants, thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
First question. Tell the people about your background in coaching in football.
Sure. Started right after college. Was a graduate assistant for 2 seasons up at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. In the middle of that, I actually went and coached in Europe for a season. And then when I came back to Eau Claire, I was hired full-time, did 1 season more at Eau Claire. From there, I became the defensive coordinator at Manchester College, which is now Manchester University, which is just outside Fort Wayne, Indiana, another Division III school there. I was there for 5 years. After that ended, I ended up at the Minnesota State University, Mankato, for 5 years, a Division II school up in Minnesota. And then after 5 years there, I became the head football coach at Elmhurst College, where I spent 5 years as well.
Awesome. And first, and always the big question, and I talked to you, especially since you have coached college net, what is one of the biggest things that parents do not understand about the recruiting process? What do you think?
I think they expect it to happen faster than it does. I think there's a fear from parents and players too, where they're always behind. I'm behind. And you're really not, unless you're a super elite type of player. You're not really going to be looked at until your junior year at the earliest, but there's tons of guys that the summer before their senior year is really where recruiting picks up and takes off for them. I mean, very rarely. We had Brian Sanborn at Lake Zurich my first 2 years here. Very rarely do you have a player who, after their sophomore year, gets offers and goes from there. Now, he had some legacy and obviously a very good football player too. But for the most part, that recruiting stuff doesn't tend to happen until junior year, start the offseason your junior year, really pick up the summer heading into your senior year. And then, so I think that's probably for me, the biggest question I get is, a panicked parent thinking their kid's really behind in the recruiting process. And that's, I think, for me, where parents are they don't understand that it actually does move a little bit slower than it appears to online.
Now you do a wonderful job on Twitter. You get exposure to your kids. What would you say is what would you say, but what do you feel is, how important is the relationship between the player and that high school football coach, head coach, to get to a college coach, that relationship?
Oh, it's paramount. I mean, I've never recruited a kid that I hadn't talked to their head coach. And I'd have to really think if I know of kids that are being recruited that haven't, communicated with the head football coach. I think, for one, the head football coach needs to know the kid's genuine interest, right? A lot of people think they want to play college football, and then they realize, I don't really want to play college football. So I think that's the first conversation that's got to be had. Now, I've done this offseason. I've been able to actually go into the homes of some of our players, sit down with them and their parents, and say, okay, what are your goals? What are you looking to try and accomplish? Do you understand the different levels? Do you understand how the scholarships work at different levels? There's a difference between an FBS scholarship and FCS scholarship. They can divide the FCS ones. They can't divide the FBS ones. Division II offers scholarships. NAIA offers scholarships. Division III doesn't offer scholarships, but they do financial aid. Kind of go through all that. And some parents are pretty well knowledge, have good knowledge about how all that works, and some aren't. So we kind of talk through that and say, okay, well, where do you, then it goes to the player. Okay, where do you see yourself? All right, you want to be an FBS guy. Okay, this is, kind of where you fit, in the people that I've seen through my career who've fallen in that line. And here's what to expect. Here's your typical, how it works, with offers and, whether they're committable offers, non-committable offers, all those different things, just kind of educate them that way. But without communicating to me first that that's their interest, it'd be really hard to get into any of those conversations.
How important is Twitter right now in recruiting, would you say?
I think it's pretty important, not from the standpoint of you got to be tweeting all the time, but you have to have an account because college coaches are using the direct messaging just to communicate. It's easier for them to track probably than cell phones. Texting is great, and basically sending a direct message is like texting. But the difference is, as a college recruiter, you got to think about it. If you're starting with 150 kids in your area, you're not going to put 150 kids' cell phone numbers into your phone.
Yeah.
Then you're going to change that out every year, every cycle. But you can follow million people if you want on social media and communicate through direct message that way. And I think that's where the key is. Now, you could where it can hurt you is some of the stuff that you do tweet or retweet or those kinds of things, because all that shows up. Even if you just like something, all that stuff shows up. But you don't have to be a huge social media person, I don't think, to be recruited, but you should have it so that you can communicate with coaches.
All right, and this is the last question, because I love this question, especially talking to Division III coaches. You were Division III head coach at Elmhurst College. How many friends did you have in the Division I level?
Oh, I've got coaches that I've coached with all over Division I, Division II, Division III, back in the high school ranks. I think that's one of the fun things, having transitioned out of college to high school, is I have coaches that come through our school just because they know me, and they know, hey, if I go see Ron up at Lake Zurich, he might have a kid, and if I heard about a kid. He'll let me know if he really can play, can't play. He'll know the guys in this conference if they can play, can't play. So we'll have coaches just stopping through, and it could be a guy I coached against. It could be a guy that I coached with or coached with a guy I know. That's pretty much my winter is coaches coming in and out with just those kinds of connections.
And a second question, just a little bit of a small follow-up question. This last one. How many times does a college coach ask you about division about team rivals, teams that you faced, about their players? How many times have you?
Every coach that's good at his job comes in and says, "Hey, who around the area?" And it might not even be. Basically, is usually how they phrase it: is, "Hey, who around the area do you like? Have you heard?" Or, "Hey, we're looking. We're going over to XYZ school. You guys played them. What did you think of so-and-so?" And, like, "Oh, so-and-so is a good player. Yeah, he was a matchup trouble for us," or "I don't even know who that is." I'll tell them, like, I don't even know who that person is. And that's, that'll be for them, it's all about collecting information, right? It's all about getting as much information on people as you can from all variety of sources. And what I tell our guys is how you separate yourself in recruiting is you got to win the tiebreakers, right? I mean, if you're 6'1", 200 pounds, and he's 6'1", 200 pounds, and you run a 4.6 40 and he runs a 4.6 40, what's the difference? What are the tiebreakers? Is it grades? Is it work ethic? Is it, things you do in the community? Is it, just being a good person versus a bad person? I don't know. But those are the things. Those are the tiebreakers. So that's what coaches are trying to figure out. So they'll ask rival coaches about other players to try and stack up that board so they can make a decision between player A and player B. They just try and get as much information as they can.
Good.
Okay.
All right, Coach Chrissy of Glenbard South, and I consider him one of the top coaches that gets out the information for his players, the two college coaches. He does an absolute wonderful job, really one of the best jobs in the state of Illinois. Have always been impressed with him, always advertising his kids. There was a wonderful job on the website, on the Google website. He gets his kids' information out there as quick as possible. Coach Chrissy, thanks again for joining me.
Hey, no problem, Pete.
No, thank you. Coach, let me ask you a question, and you're going to be the first coach I ask this question. How do college coaches approach you to talk about a kid?
Well, I think it starts with forming a relationship. So one, being in the Glenbard school system helps, right? So generally, this DuPage County, and then in conjunction with being in the Glenbards, there's already somewhat of an established pipeline. But I will say that, just getting out there and introducing yourself to coaches when you're at some of the showcases in the summer, and just also, when they come in and recruit your building, is just kind of get to know them on a personal basis, establish that relationship as much as possible so you keep them coming in the building. And that's really how it started, is just trying to make a personal connection with these guys. Because, it's a situation where you're going to help them hopefully in the future, and they're going to help you in the present by giving you resources or helping you out with X's and O's or whatever the case may be. So it's really just trying to establish a relationship with these guys early and often.
Quick question, and I always ask the coach, especially when you guys get involved with Huddle Net. How long does you and your staff work on Huddle for, would you say?
Oh, man. Well, I will say it has been less and less when it comes to film breakdown and data entry, because we utilize something called Huddle Assist, so they enter all of our data for us.
Okay.
So that helps significantly. But when it comes to the recruiting process for Huddle, Huddle does a really nice job giving these kids tutorials on how to make them. Yeah. I also will sit down with kids and have them establish what are their most explosive plays, because coaches want to see them do specific things for specific positions. So we try to find those clips and really teach them how to trim them down, so it's just when they're the main focus of a play, and cut certain things out. They don't need to see us break the huddle. They don't need to see the 10 seconds after the play. So utilizing the resources on Huddle and then coaching them up based off of knowing what coaches want to see based on the position that they're going to be recruited for.
How important is Twitter to you in the recruiting process?
Well, for me, it's an opportunity for us to, showcase our program and showcase the kids. Twitter is still, I would say, a very vital component for the recruitment process. And it's just putting those kids out, putting their names out, putting their highlights out, and I make sure that they establish a Twitter presence, and I always tweet the Glenbard South Twitter account, and then I'll retweet it. And if need be, I've tagged you in things, guys like Edgy, guys like Clint Cosgrove, Brian, all these guys in the Midwest that I know are going to connect with some of these college level coaches. But Twitter is still a vital component to the whole process. And, connecting with coaches too directly, DMing them about certain kids that I think could benefit their program, or DMing them and saying, hey, give this kid a look. What's your thoughts on him? And then also encouraging the kids to do the same thing.
Awesome. Last question, and this is one of the most important questions that I'm starting to ask more coaches now this.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most important thing between the relationship between you and a player that wants to get recruited on your team?
Oh, the biggest thing is honesty. And when I say that is, it's a two-way street. And the first thing is every kid, of course, wants to be a Division I athlete. And we all know that is a very hard thing to do, especially in today's day and age, considering, the pandemic, the transfer portal. It's significantly harder to attain a roster spot, let alone a scholarship at a Division I level. So being honest with them with that, also being honest with the players and the families about what their ability levels are. And when I put out a prospect sheet and send it to the schools and send them to the coaches, I'm very realistic with the level of recommendation. So I'm just because a kid says to me, I want to play Division I FCS ball, doesn't mean that I'm going to put them out that way. We've had kids who I put out that way, and they've never come back to earning a Division I scholarship. Maybe it was a Division II, and we've had it the other way as well. And then also being honest with the kids in terms of if they want to attain something, if they want to potentially put themselves in the conversations for a scholarship, whether it's at any level, but particularly Division I, you got to tell them. I mean, there's specific things. You have to have specific measurements. You have to have specific ability levels. It has to be seen on film. You need to have the film to do it. You got to have measurables. And also being honest with the coaches that are coming in and saying to these guys, hey, this young man really is an FCS level kid. He's not a stretch kid, or he's an FBS kid. And the kids that are kind of borderline, I always say to the coaches, and I tell this to the parents and the players, I let the coaches determine the market on a player and what level they think they're going to be. So again, I think honesty is always going to be the best policy through this whole process.
Okay. And thank you again, Coach Chrissy. Coach Dodson of Chicago Academy, thank you for joining me. And I gotta say, and this has been honestly one of the biggest things, and I see a lot of coaches that really don't involve getting in with social media and getting their kids exposure. But you, Coach Dodson of Chicago Academy, have done just a magnificent job of getting kids exposure, getting your kids exposure from Chicago Academy. And I just want to ask you how in what ways have you been able to get your kids exposure? That's one of the first questions I want to ask you.
Okay. Well, what I've did basically during the season, after every game we would have, I would basically email a coach. So it would be days when I'm emailing, like right after a game, a late game, I would be up to 11, 12 o'clock at night, sending out maybe 20 to 30 emails or Twitter DMs. And when I would get responses, I would keep emailing those college coaches after every single game. I would update them on if he had this many yards, this many tackles. Like every week I was like bugging those coaches and filling up their emails and DMs with basically updates every game.
Okay. And how how many times would you say you use Twitter for your football players?
90% of the time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So what happened is right before the season started, and it's crazy. I haven't had a Twitter account since high school, so I haven't had Twitter since like maybe 2011. And my coach, Clay McAllister from Phillips, when he was there his last year, he told me, he was like, Anthony, to get your players out, you need to get a Twitter. And I was like, I didn't know people still even got on Twitter. So once I downloaded it, because I was used to emailing coaches, and I wondered, season you get a lot of emails, responses. But once I made the Twitter, and I would like send these coaches DMs and stuff, and like the follows I would get from college coaches, the DMs I would get back, I just saw it was quicker access to coaches by just sending them a DM than sending a message or calling their office.
What is the best way? What is the best way for like a young coach who's taking over a program and a program that's not that big in the state of Illinois? What's the best way to get their kids exposure? What would you say is the best way?
I would say that honestly, the best way is just like keep promoting them. I feel like you have to treat your program like it is a big program. If you look at the Tafts, the Phillips, or any of those big schools, always posting their players. Whatever they do, they post. No matter if it's a GPA award or anything, they post it. So what I would do is I would post anything. If they had a certain game, or if they received an accolade for their GPA, or if they received a scholarship, I would just keep posting it and tagging all the important pages right now when it comes to football recruiting, according to your page as well with Deep Dish Football.
Yeah.
And it helped. And from those retweets that would get around, it helped me see like coaches from different schools, from high schools, following college coaches. So I would say just posting anything. It doesn't just have to be football. Anything involving any type of accolade, especially educational purposes, I would say post anything you can to your players.
How important, and this is going to be the last question, how important is social media in the recruiting right now?
100% important. I feel like they have it easier. And, when you think of, early 2000s or 90s or something like that, like, it was more like word of mouth. You have to follow and go find this player. You have to drive somewhere. But now you can easily just post your highlights on Twitter, get a couple retweets, and you might get a D1, D2 offer off just you posting it on Twitter. So I feel like social media is the main frame of you want to get recruited. You don't have to go through nobody, just by posting just a highlight on YouTube and Instagram could possibly change your life. So it's just about how often you take social media serious.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Coach Dodson.
No problem.
All right, Coach Vonzak, thank you so much for joining. And I just want to ask some questions. Head coach of St. Charles North, a great program, and who I consider a great job of exposing his kids to college programs, does a wonderful job on social media and gets the name out of his kids, and he does a wonderful job. It's unbelievable. Welcome, Coach.
Thanks for having me, Pete. I really appreciate first what you do for all of high school football in the state of Illinois, but I know it's a tireless job, and you just do a fantastic job of it. So thanks so much for what you do.
Thank you so much, Coach. For the first question, how does a college coach reach out to you if they're interested in one of your players?
Well, I mean, COVID did change quite a bit as far as contact, but it's going to usually happen through text message or email. We've built a good reputation within the college community, and we have a nice, I would say, Rolodex. So I'll usually get a text message or a DM via Twitter saying, hey, Coach, we're going to be in town. When can we get in and take a look? And then do you have any lists of your 2023s or 24s or 25s? And that's usually where it starts. And, we always have we have a few different avenues that we use, and I'm sure you might ask about that, but that's usually where it starts, is through a text message, email, or direct messaging.
Now you actually do something different. You have something different that you use, and I actually really love it. I really do like it. Explain what it is.
So, a friend of mine his name is Chris Herman. He started this company called Story of the Season, and the original format and what this gentleman, Chris Herman, he's based out of New York. His original platform was a virtual program of every week of your season. And when COVID hit, we needed a way to get our recruits out to the coaches who could not come into our building. So what our format is, it's kind of like what I would describe as like the Harry Potter-ish type of virtual program. We have a link that I'll send the coaches, and then it'll open up this PDF, this interactive PDF that they can swipe through on their phone, and it'll have all of our players, a profile for each player. It'll have their huddle that'll automatically start playing. It'll have their contact info, and all of the, Twitter handles that they can directly link to. And this has been a really, I think, a big asset, because now when a coach texts me or emails me, I'll send that to them, and they can look at that in their car, and then they're going to come in with a deeper knowledge of our recruits. And a lot of times they already have a list of guys, but I think nowadays, if I can get it to them right away, it's fresh in their mind, and then they get a chance to meet that player. It's been really, really useful.
Okay. And how important to you is, and how much work you put in huddle for your kids? What would you say, the work?
A lot of the times the kids are going to be making their huddle highlights weekly, but I guess I'll backtrack. I do one-on-one parent-player meetings with any kid who is interested in playing at the collegiate level. So we'll do it kind of like this through Zoom, where I used to do it face-to-face, but honestly with family and kids.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I need to show them is I can share my screen. And so we'll go through academics, we'll go through the clearinghouse, and then I'll show them how to make a huddle highlight and what their position is looking for. So then they'll do it. If they can't do it, I'll take care of it for them.
Yeah.
Like during COVID, when we didn't have any games and all we had was practice film and whatever contact days we had, I went through and made the highlights for my kids because I had the time. But like during the season, the boys are going to do it. But then what I will do is I will watch it, and I'll come back with my 2 cents. It's too long. Let's lose the music. Let's put our best plays in front. Like, you really have about 2 minutes to show, and anything after that, they're probably not watching it. So that's when I'll come to them with some sort of suggestion. And it really just depends on the student athlete and the family. How much, whatever they need me to do, I'll do, and some of the guys have a really good handle on it. Some of the parents have been through the recruiting process before. But when it's a new student or a new family to the recruiting process, I kind of want to walk them through it and be able to support them the best I can.
How key is it with that for recruiting, with the relationship between you, the high school coach, and that player and those group of parents? How key is that, would you say?
Well, anytime I sit down with a family, we talk first about the fact that if you want to play collegiate football at any level, regardless of division, you are immediately separating yourself from 98% of the students in the student population. And then it's going to take a support system, and it's going to take mom, dad, parent, guardian, the student athlete, and myself to work in conjunction with each other. And it always starts off, fun, right? It's this dream that people have had. And then as it materializes, you can see that people sometimes get overwhelmed. And that's where I feel like I've been through it before. My expertise in it, our relationship with college coaches, the ability to communicate, ask the hard questions. Again, it really depends on the family, but having that support system for the student athlete, because we're talking about 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, and they're making a life decision. It's 4 years for the next 50. And so it's really important that we always have those open lines of communication. So my families who are in our program, who are looking to play college ball, they have 24/7 access to me, because I just think it's completely necessary.
Okay, and this is the last question. This is a big question, and I've asked this to all the coaches. How important is Twitter in recruiting to you?
It's essential. It's absolutely essential. It's getting more prevalent. I think COVID, hit the fast forward button on it, but I always go through with my student athletes, here's a how we want your profile to look. I've already looked at your profile, have a screenshot of it. Here's what we need to change. Here's what we need to change your handle to so that they can access you. But I always tell them that is going to be the first introduction to you as the football player / person that they're going to get. And a lot of times, especially in this day and age, they're going to follow you on Twitter before they even contact the head football coach.
Yeah.
And so that's when you have to have the discussion with the parents. Mom and dad, maybe, you're not on board with the social media, but we kind of have to be, because we have to meet the colleges where they're at. And if we're not doing that, we're already kind of behind. I would say we're behind the times with it, because that's the access point that these colleges have right now.
Thank you so much, Coach.
My pleasure.
All right, so we are currently with Oswego East head coach Tyson LeBlanc, who I have a tremendous respect for, has always been a great marketer of his players to colleges, wonderful on the social media game and the perspective as well. Does a wonderful job. Coach LeBlanc, thank you for being here.
I appreciate it, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, first question. How important to you is the relationship between the player, your players, and you for recruiting?
I think it's very important. I mean, it's you develop trust through time with these kids. You spend 2-3 years with them before the recruiting process really starts for them in most cases. And the more time you can spend with the kids, the more you get to know the kids, the easier it is to provide good feedback for the college coaches, and those college coaches are making big investments when they start recruiting these kids. So I think that's important.
Okay. What would you say? What would you say is the first contact between a college coach to you on a recruit, on a player on your team?
It really depends on the level of the player and the level of the college. The higher Division I schools, you're going to find that you start to get contacts and stuff, after sophomore year in most cases. But when you get down to the Division III guys, that contact may not come until, January of their senior year. So it really just depends on the level of the player and the level of the division that's doing the recruiting.
How much time would you say you and your staff spend on huddles?
On highlight films and things like that?
Yeah.
We asked our kids to put their highlight film, get their highlights together. And, for the most part, kids usually have an inflated view of what a highlight actually is.
Yeah.
And the thing that we really stress to our kids is you want to put your best plays at the beginning of the highlight film. And then, it shouldn't really be any more than, 4 minutes is probably a max for a highlight film, because a college coach, when you look at the number of kids that they have to evaluate, they're not going to spend a whole lot of time, especially waiting 2 or 3 minutes into the highlight film to see those plays that pop. I would say that in any given year, from a staff, we probably spend 4 to 5 hours on reviewing highlight films that guys put together.
Okay. What would you say? How many times does a college coach ask you about a rival team's player?
Every time they come in the door.
Awesome.
Every time. Yeah, there's
awesome.
I think part of that, from my perspective, part of that is the relationships that we as high school coaches develop with the college coaches. It depends on the college coach. Guys that I've known for 10, 15 years, they're going to ask more questions and get more in depth. Or guys that I, maybe have just met, they're going to say, hey, who are the kids in the area we should be recruiting? It just depends on how far into the conversation that goes.
All right, last question. And this is I like to ask this question a lot. How important has Twitter been in recruiting, would you say?
I think huge. I think it's gigantic. Nowadays, it's not only from, do we have to do a good job on our end as high school coaches getting the kids information out, but you have to be a self-promoter. As an athlete, as a parent of an athlete, you have to be a self-promoter. It's the easy way for college coaches to be able to find the high school kids. It's an easy way for them to find highlight films. I think it's huge. I also think that it's very important that, your social media presence is very respectful. And that you make sure that you're not liking just random tweets that your buddies may like and things like that. You have to be very conscious of what you're doing while you're on social media. I can think of some of our players, current players, past players, that Twitter was really essentially how they got noticed. So I think it's extremely important.
And I lied. I got one more question. I'm sorry about that. One more question. Right. Okay. What is one of the things that parents you feel that don't understand on recruiting from what a high school perspective of what a high school coach does? What do you think is like?
As much as we have the contact with the college coaches,
yeah,
the promotion piece of it really has to come from the player himself. You know, as again, we as college coach, or we as high school coaches do what we can on our end, but I think you really have to self-promote. You have to make yourself, help make your kids visible. You know, you hear if they're good enough, the coaches will find you. You know, sometimes that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes that just doesn't happen. And I think that's more of a being visible and a marketing. I mean, really, you're marketing yourself, you're marketing your kid for that next opportunity. And, you know, I also think that parents, as high school coaches, it is our responsibility to help find the best fit for their kid. I think that's a huge piece of it. And, you know, in most cases, most kids aren't Division I football players. Yeah. So sometimes parents get a little discouraged when you start kind of filling them in that, you know, you're not looking at going to that Big Ten school or that MAC school that you know, you're probably going to end up at that you know, St. Louis conference school or one of those D2 conferences or a D3 conference.
Yeah.
And you know, I always tell parents and kids, it's better to go where you're wanted.
Yes.
Than to, you know, go, you know, walk-ons are great opportunities, but the reality of the situation is they don't always work out, and probably they work out less than they do work, you know. So it's important for kids to go where they're wanted, and I think parents need to understand that.
Awesome. All right, so we got who I tremendously respect, and I think does a bang-up job. Him and his coaching staff do a great job in the recruiting process. They get the information out. Coach Pyron, head coach of Batavia High School, does a wonderful job. And that coaching staff, again, like I said, they're just tremendous. And I know a lot of people, you get angry when I talk about Batavia football, but you got to love that program and the community. So, Coach Pyron, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks, Big Pete. Nice to see you, and hope all is well. And appreciate again all you do for kids and exposure for football in the state of Illinois. Just a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Coach. First question, and I asked, and I'm always amazed by this. The process of you getting out all the information from your recruits, the stats, the film, and all that, every email, every week of the season, how do you do it? Who helps out and all that?
You know, really everything is kind of a whole staff thing. First, obviously we're blessed and we're lucky to have a longtime staff here who was able to put a lot of that information together. The other part of it is I'm really true head coach. We here at Batavia High School have a lot of our staff who are responsible. You know, Matt Holm is our D coordinator, Sean Anderson, our OC, Billy Calmateo does special teams, also helps me greatly with our recruiting process with our kids. So because we, you know, have a lot of, I guess, opportunity to do things individually and a lot of autonomy within our program, it lets me do some of those sorts of, I guess, CEO type things, Big Pete, that I can do. So, but yeah, I just think it's important. If we expect our kids to get exposure, then I have a responsibility to provide you guys who report on our sports with the information that makes it easy for you to do so. And so that's why I think it's important to do that every week. And yeah, I do get comments, you know, about our little media guide we do from, you know, yourself and some of the sports reporters and our recruiting groups and things around the state. And then in season, if I, you know, keep you updated, hopefully there's stories and opportunities for you to, you know, learn more about our program and our kids.
How important is that relationship between you and the kid about recruiting, about you and your players? How important is it?
I think more than anything, it's the trust factor. And this is the big part where I think there's some confusion with a lot of people. The primary recruiting tool that any kid has is how well they play the game of football.
Yeah.
Are they good? Can they play? And do they pass on the field that eyeball test in high school games? That's number one. The second thing is, in almost every situation I know of, the colleges, the schools, all the system that's set up is centered around the high school game. Now that's different, as you know, Pete, from other stuff that's out there. Not all high school sports are that way, but with high school football, the high school is really the centerpiece of the showcase of the player. It's the high school season, the high school games, which, as you know, has been a little bit of a mess here in Illinois because of the weird, you know, loss of a season in the spring season. But then relationship-wise, I think if you have good relationships with your players, good open communication, and you are in touch with your players all the time, I think the thing that's most important is players within their own team begin to understand, I think, the level of play that they are at, but also, I guess the thing that is most important is understand that all of college football, regardless of the level that you play, it's special and unique, and the ability to play at that level is a whole different can of worms. And the statistics and the percentages and all that. But you really have to love football. You have to love football to play college football, and I mean love it.
Yes.
It's got to be extremely important to you.
And this is one question I like to ask. How many times do college coaches come to you and ask about rival football teams' players?
All the time. I think that's pretty much the way it works, Big Pete. Basically the way I envision it is it's this sort of interlocking old-fashioned net where the coaches are working with all the schools, communicating with all the high school coaches, and then they're communicating coach to coach and program to program. So imagine if we have a player, Jalen Buckley comes to mind. I'm certain that when a coach comes here, he visits St. Charles North, Glenbard North, Geneva, St. Charles East, Wheaton North, Wheaton South. And after they go over our players, they say, talk to me about the Buckley kid from Batavia, or talk to me about, there's a defensive lineman at Glenbard North. What do you think of that kid? He seems, we're not sure about height that I can, man, that kid, he killed us, whatever. I mean, you understand that. So it's our kids, our future kids, and then anybody in our league that stood out, our opponents' kids, and then teams we may have played in the playoffs. We get all those questions, and then all of these guys talk to each other, at the Holiday Inn Express, or, text each other, or they coach with this coach, and they're asking him what they think at their level, where they stand, and, everybody ends up getting to the point that they're at, and they all have each other's film. All the college coaches have the huddle program where they can see all of our game films, everything like that. So, all that information is out there, but it's really the first check is the high school coaches. That's really where it's at.
All right, and this is the last question, and I gotta ask this, and this is because you guys do a wonderful job. Your website is great because it has great information. It helps out a lot of college coaches.
Right.
Who's the head administrator of that website?
Well, it isn't as great as it's been, but during COVID we fell behind. But it's kind of a group approach. Myself, Coach Kalowski, Coach Therial, we all try to keep things updated, provide stats, data, update the videos each week of the players, provide links to the huddle, our huddle system and things like that. So if you can go there, you can get to everything, I would say, relatively quickly. It is interesting, too, maybe parents don't know this, and you know this. There are a lot of services that are out there that the colleges pay for that are free. And players, by their level of play, through their coaching staffs, through, again, this communication network that's developed, end up on all those lists. So they're being all cross-referenced and checked. I don't really know, and again, I don't want to be disparaging about anybody's industry or work, but we have had players that have paid for services. And what I would say to you is it has seemed like the greatest value in that service, if there was a value, was some of those services have the ability for players to do a lot of searching using their engines and their tools. Yeah. And so maybe as a college searching tool, maybe looking at prices of colleges, maybe looking at locations, looking at reviews of colleges, as a college search tool, that has seemed to be maybe the greatest benefit. From a promotional standpoint, so much goes through the high schools that I'm not so certain that it's would be a fair statement to say this organization got me a college scholarship. So I don't want to say they're not helpful, because I think there is some value in that, especially when kids have no idea what they're doing with school. But I think you have to be careful about the amount of money that you spend. And I know that you're well aware of that.